starts with a fury and swells with excitement, second after second. Lifeboat, directed with daring boldness by Alfred Hitchcock, from John Steinbeck's dramatic, realistic story, exactly as 9 million readers thrilled to it in Collier's. Lifeboat stars Tallulah Bankhead with William Bendix, Walter Slezak, Mary Anderson, John Hodiak, Henry Hull. The entire cast superb. This picture dares to strip life of all its sham, that shows human beings at their best and at their worst. Here is the joyous ecstasy of youth finding love and the smoldering rage of a love burned out.
Welcome to the 29th episode of Foreign Correspondents Deeper into Hitchcock podcast. My name is Michał Leszczyk and I'm joined as always by
your co-host Sebastian Smoliński. Hello everyone.
I really cherish today's episode, not only because we will discuss a movie that's very interesting, Lifeboat, made in 1944, but I cherish the episode also because today we are truly transatlantic in our recording session. I'm in Warsaw, as usual, and Sebastian is actually in the United States. Sebastian, where are you exactly? Tell us.
I'm in Philadelphia, so in one of America's oldest cities. I'm doing a 1-month research here at the University of Pennsylvania. Luckily, I'm not stuck somewhere in the middle of the ocean on a lifeboat. I'm safely in my apartment. I had to, of course, since it's America, I had to turn my air conditioning off so that we could record this episode with good quality, audio quality.
So, you will hear American ambience whenever Sebastian is speaking, and you will hear Polish ambience whenever I am speaking. We first of all, it's wonderful that we can be doing this and we can record our podcast episode under those conditions. Also, we want to really appreciate the feedback that we have been getting recently. It seems that the podcast is really getting to new listeners, and some of the emails that we got recently were really very nice in terms of, it seems that there are listeners who really enjoy this podcast. So if you are, so thank you. And if you are happening to be listening to this podcast, please share it on social media, because we know that there is a devoted group of listeners, but we always dream of having an even larger auditorium. We are doing this podcast completely free of charge and completely out of pure Hitchcock passion. So if you can spread the word, we will really, really appreciate it. Also, we spoke about many Hitchcock films, especially from the 1930s, that were recognizing Europe as and recognizing European countries as being on the brink of war. And today we will tackle a wartime film. In the meantime, an actual war started and escalated to the east of Poland. The Russian aggression on Ukraine is going on as we speak. I just want to refer to it because for the sake of historical record, we are recording this in April 2022, and as we speak, the cruel, horrible war is still raging. The refugees are multiplying also in Poland. There's a huge wave, so we are recording this under circumstances that I think Hitchcock would have responded to as well, because today we will talk about Lifeboat, a film released in 1944, a film that was originally based on a specially commissioned novella by John Steinbeck, a hugely influential author of Mice and Men and The Grapes of Wrath. And this movie is probably the purest case of, let's say, wartime propaganda on one hand, but also of simply tackling the theme of World War II in a movie by Alfred Hitchcock, in a feature movie by Alfred Hitchcock. We already spoke about Foreign Correspondent, which basically was this warning that, the war is here and its neutrality is not the way to go. But here America is at war already, and Hitchcock is contributing to the wartime effort with this film, which, as we will see, was highly controversial at the original release. But before I ask my first question to Sebastian, just a very brief synopsis of the film so that everybody is on the same page. This film actually takes place entirely on a lifeboat, on the titular lifeboat, where no less than 10 people convene at some point. They are all survivors of a ship that was sunk by a German Nazi submarine, and we see a group of people, mostly American, but not only American, who at one point are joined by a German who turns out to be a Nazi U-boat captain, played by Walter Slezak. And this is, from purely Hitchcockian standpoint, this is one of those films which take place entirely in a single setting. This time in a setting of the lifeboat, and other films in this group are, for example, Rope from 1948 that we'll discuss, or Dial M for Murder, which we'll also discuss. But basically, we never leave the lifeboat. This is the technical and storytelling challenge of this film. And of course, we see the group of survivors as they are trying to cope, and as they are trying also to figure out whether the German who is smiling and singing nice German songs is friendly or is actually murderous. And what happens later on, we will, of course, discuss. I haven't seen this movie in 20 years. This was my, coming back to it after a long time. I have some thoughts, but Sebastian, how did you react to Lifeboat?
So let me put the cards on the table. It's probably the least favorite of Hitchcock's 1940s movies, that for me at least. I also haven't seen it for many years. I was just coming to it briefly, like just studying film history, but not to the movie itself. And I think this gimmick probably, not probably, we know it. It was impressive in the 1940s. The gimmick to set the whole film in a single boat, with intense pre-production, with intense pre-planning, and 20th Century Fox lot, a water tank full of water that made it possible. These were all technical challenges that Hitchcock and his crew met very well. But I think I would say it's a historical artifact to a certain extent, although it has contemporary reverberations, I would say. And for us, I think it's one of the most interesting cases for us as foreign correspondents, because if you treat it as it should have been treated, as an allegory, then you can really kind of interpret it through the modern contemporary lens, also in terms of the West's reaction to war in Ukraine and so on. So in this sense, it feels contemporary, but as a, let's say, piece of thrilling Hitchcock movie making, I don't find it relevant anymore, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, it's really a different experience altogether to watch this film under the current conditions, and as we follow the West's various response to Russian aggression and to the figure of Putin, it's really fascinating and horrifying to witness this film, which was made in 1944, tackling those issues. Basically, I would say that if I were to generalize, the film is about the response of a democratic society to a tyranny. And here the tyranny is Nazi Germany, and there's a question of response. How do we respond? As one of the characters say at the very end, what do you do with people like that? Right? And this is exactly the question that the film asks. Well, I'm not a fan of this film either. I mean, I probably liked it more when I watched it for the first time many years ago. Nowadays, I rewatched it on a beautiful, restored copy. There's a Blu-ray that was released in the UK, Eureka Masters of Cinema Blu-ray, which doesn't have many extras, but the quality of the image is very beautiful. And yes, it's disappointing to see this film because, first of all, the artificiality is shocking. I mean, for not for a second you actually feel that you are in the full open sea, especially as far as soundscape is concerned. And this is not a glib remark on my part. I'm not like one of those contemporary viewers who would view a film from 1944 and say, oh, it's not like real life. No, but I think that there is a price that Hitchcock is paying, for filming this inside the studio tank, and with this sound mix, it really it doesn't have the immediacy, the makeup, the way people look after 48 hours, after on this boat. It's not convincing in simply in the realistic way. Although I have to say that there are many things in the film that are shocking, and I can only imagine the audience in 1944, witnessing the death of a child, suicide of the mother, amputation of a leg. There's so many shocking things in this film. So yes, I guess this movie was probably very impressive in 1944, also for those reasons. And I think that at times even Hitchcock's sadistic tendencies definitely show up here, especially in the amputation scene. But we will come back to that. What is really important to remember is the class and political and ideological background. John Steinbeck was very left-leaning. He was practically, almost a communist sympathizer, a very proud member of the American left. And his view here, which sort of is preserved by Hitchcock, but not really, because Hitchcock was not that much aware of, and he wasn't pursuing this class theme. But this sample of human beings on this boat represent various classes. And I won't be mentioning everybody, but just for the record, Constance Porter, who is played by Tallulah Bankhead, legendary lady of the New York scene, of the New York theater, who didn't give that many film performances. She's here and she's playing this sort of high society lady who is wearing jewelry. She's looking fantastic. You can easily mistake her for Bette Davis in the film. But then it turns out that she's actually from south side of Chicago, so she's working class, but hiding it. There's Gus Smith, William Bendix, who is basically this truly working class guy who loves his girlfriend, and they're dancing and Roseland dance hall and stuff. There's very importantly John Hodiak, who plays John Kovac, who is Czechoslovakian, although this is not a Czechoslovakian name, it's a Hungarian last name. But, apparently Czechoslovakia was this sort of blanket term for Eastern Europe at the time. You just need to watch Casablanca to see that. So he's Czechoslovakian by the name of Kovac, and he's referred to in the Truffaut-Hitchcock conversations as a communist. And he's really like he's conscious of the let's say class struggle. He's from the south side of Chicago. He worked in the meatpacking district, so he has this ties to those novels of, I don't know, Upton Sinclair, The Jungle, or something like that. He's from that world of brute force, of brute exploitation of the working classes. And of course, there is the capitalist. Played by Henry Hull, Mr. Rittenhouse, who remains a capitalist to the very end, let's say. So what I'm saying, this is like a little sketchbook of possible class relations. And how did this aspect, was it interesting for you to see this? Because I think there's a sort of political argument going on in the background. Did you react to this register?
Yes, I think class differences are most interesting here, for me at least. More interesting than, let's say, the propagandistic aspect of the movie. But two notes before I will answer your question. One is that I found it very funny. It's not of any importance to our discussion, but here in Philadelphia, I'm just next to Rittenhouse Square, which is like, maybe I should not boast, but it's one of the most beautiful areas in the city. So watching that and thinking about the character of Rittenhouse, who is kind of embodying capitalist values, it's a funny coincidence. Yes, I think these class differences are really important here. And the second thing I wanted to mention is, of course, we have these predecessors of these films set in one location, like The Lady Vanishes by Hitchcock, of course, is one of them. But also Grand Hotel is often cited as this microcosm. But I was especially I found this similarity between this film and Stagecoach, which was also, and why I think this reference is important, is because in Stagecoach you also had this microcosm of U.S. society, of course, maybe a bit historically distanced. It was one of the first A-class westerns, 1939. But you also have this striking class divisions between precisely capitalist and these more, let's say, less assimilated characters who were less assimilated to this capitalist values, like, of course, John Wayne character. And also Stagecoach at the time, which you can read in a BFI book on the film, Stagecoach at the time was read as a political allegory, with different factions reflected in the film, with Roosevelt's metaphors planted somewhere in the movie, commentaries about taxes and so on. So I think Lifeboat continues that, although what you said, I think, is important, that we associate Steinbeck with this kind of narrative, which really shows us if not the aspiring communist, then the poor of US, the oppressed classes. And of course here I think why I don't find Kovac's character a communist per se, right? So why I wouldn't agree with Hitchcock is that I don't think he considers himself one, right? He's the Tallulah Bankhead character, she makes fun of him, that he is a communist. She mentions Comintern, and he calls him Tavarish, which is, of course, her way of making fun of him. But of course, he's more just purely working class. Maybe he would like to unionize, his trade and so on. So more in this left-leaning tradition, not very overtly political. But I think it's interesting that even at this very hot moment, like you mentioned that it's the most important of Hitchcock's wartime movies, it's of course it's also his last feature that tackles war as World War II as a main theme. I think it's striking that even in at this time, working for a relatively conservative studio, right, 20th Century Fox, he manages to really focus our attention on these differences, on the way people do not agree, on the way that you cannot really reach a consensus when you have people of so many different backgrounds. And of course the character of Gus that you mentioned, it's important that he's a working class character, but it's also important that he's of German descent, right? And I found this interesting observation that Gus also physically mirrors the German character, Walter Sleza character, so that they are kind of like doubles, another Hitchcockian theme, that you can see maybe what could happen with a German in US, that he becomes a proud citizen, and then what happens with Germans who left in Germany, they become Nazis, not good Germans anymore, but Nazis, as we would discover throughout the narrative. So I think it's interesting. And the last note to address what you say about style and artificiality of the movie, I also find it puzzling a bit, because those were the times, as we can read in Patrick Keating's book, for example, about cinematography in classical Hollywood. Those were the times of huge changes in style. Hollywood was reacting to war, to documentary aesthetic, to newsreels, and movies like Air Force by Howard Hawks and several other movies, and cinematographers like James Wong Ho, so the master. They were trying to aesthetically respond to the chaos, bloodshed, and uncertainty of the era, changing some principles of Hollywood filmmaking. We don't really see that here in Lifeboat. This technical challenge of shooting a movie in one place on a tank was maybe too much for Hitchcock, and I think that the rhythm of this film has this strange quality of a kind of a lullaby. It's drifting. We drift. Of course, the characters are drifting in a literal sense, but also visually, the boat is drifting, and it may. I'm not suggesting it's a boring film. It's not, but it may, put you to sleep, metaphorically speaking. The rhythm of this boat. So, yeah, I think it's staged pretty conservatively. Although Drew Casper in a short documentary attached to the Blu-ray edition of the film, he says that Hitchcock made his best not to repeat a shot, to make every shot look differently, because there's just one location, and framing the way he puts one group of characters together against other groups, shot reverse shots. It's done in a very smart way, but still you don't have this feeling of immediacy or some visual freshness in this film, and this is something I cannot really kind of accept as a viewer.
Mm-hmm. Well, the film, I agree, but let's remember that the film definitely seemed impressive to the viewers in 1944. Glenn McWilliams' cinematography was nominated for an Oscar. Alfred Hitchcock was nominated as best director. So I guess, yes, in 1944 this must have seemed a little bit fresh. Nowadays, I agree with you, and I think, as I was listening to you, I think I put my finger on what is exactly that bothers me about staging in this film. Is that my problem is that we never really feel the size of this boat. It seems to be like widening and shortening as the movie goes. There's not a sense, for example, of physical discomfort, of passing people on the boat, on finding your spot on the boat. It seems like it's not a problem. It's spacious enough for everybody to to form those little groups, then to form even couples as later on becomes, and you never feel this is the in Rope, for example. I think that you exactly feel the size of this apartment, that of this bachelor pad, that the film is taking place. Here I didn't feel that, especially with 10 people on this boat. This is a crowded boat, okay, and it's not easy to share a boat with 10 people, even if it's a yacht, and this is a lifeboat. So I think in those terms this is really becomes like a theater stage, and yes, it's a theatrical film. Tallulah Bankhead brings on her theatrical ways and her mannerisms, I think, also to the role. So, and Bill Cron, in his essay in the booklet of the Blu-ray edition, also evokes Brechtian tradition to the film. So yes, I think there's this theatricality that sort of takes away from this immediacy, let's say. But on the other hand, I would say that as always with Hitchcock, when you look closer, the film is crazy. This is, and I just wanted to tackle one thing that I didn't think of before, which is, this time when I watched it, sort of I was following it, and of course, the sexual relations on the boat, because there's this moment which really struck me as almost like pornographic.
Yeah.
When Tallulah Bankhead pierces a newspaper with a finger, and John Hodiak is reading the newspaper. First of all, just I want to hear your take on this, because they hate each other at the beginning. She's the society lady with the diamond bracelet on her arm. She's losing her possessions. He's the communist. She calls him Comintern, blah blah blah. So but he's purely physical, so we see the tattoos, he exposes his chest, she's in the mink coat, and then one shot suddenly establishes that there is a sexual chemistry. The moment that the lifeboat is actually flooded with water, and the most dramatic moment in the film, they get flooded with water as well, and suddenly there's this really passionate kiss between them, like a really, really passionate kiss, which is surprising. And then in the next scene, we see that there are those couples forming on the boat, that Hume Cronin and this lady Heather Angel, she's they're in their little nook almost planning marriage. They will actually be married later on, as we can imagine, but at the edge of the boat there's shirtless John Hodiak and Tallulah Bankhead. This has a totally a post-coital feeling, like this scene. She's reclining. It's like they already had sex. And the question for me, like, was it in public? Like, did they have sex like in front of those people? Then we have a shot that's probably one of the most blatantly erotic shots in all of Hitchcock: the foot play. 2 feet, naked feet, caressing each other in the water. She's, caressing his foot. So this is very, again, highly erotic. And this whole conversation, she's like this female cat, at his side, and she's examining his chest. She's reading, all those tattoos, and there's this very, very clear sexual dynamics going on here. And I was just wondering, like, exactly what's happening here, because I cannot imagine a less erotic environment than this boat. Like, you are sharing space with 10 people, which Hitchcock is not, of course, showing, but all the bodily functions had to be performed. There's even a short mentioning, like indirect, but of urination, when John Hodiak says that when the U-boat struck their boat at in the very first scene, very first conversation between John Hodiak and Tallulah Bankhead, and she asks him, where were you on the boat when we got hit? And he was, I was in the restroom. I was about to, I was washing myself, So it's clear that he was about to urinate. And then you see this scene, they definitely, all those people shared the least comfortable aspects of intimacy together on this boat. And yet this is the milieu that Hitchcock chooses for, like, this erotic, nest. And this made me think of one biographical detail. Remember how Hitchcock proposed to his wife? He said that it was on a train or on a boat. They were being sick. They were actually having seasickness or something like that, and that it was at this time when they were both being sick, and he proposed to Alma Reville. And suddenly I had this news flash that with Hitchcock's his let's say toilet obsessions, and like this very murky teenage boy notions of sexuality, probably what we see here is like something like the situation when he proposed to his wife under those very unfavorable circumstances, when they were vomiting and stuff. So I was looking at Hitchcock, who is staging his one of his very few post-coital scenes, and he chooses this horrible environment to do this. And I don't know, it's just it's really sick, I would say. Like, it's really perverse in not in a nice way. I would say. I think there's something very disturbing about this. I don't know what's your take.
No, I totally agree. And the shot you're mentioning, the post-coital shot, I had the feeling that suddenly in this honest, earnest propaganda movie, there is this exploitation quality. I was thinking, if this movie was made in the 1960s by a independent, low-budget company like some Roger Corman or someone, it would be this exploitation movie of people having sex and doing crazy stuff on a boat. So yeah, I think it is there. It's striking. Nowadays, it's maybe even more striking than it was before. I wonder, because I don't know if all these details, these sexual details, were already elaborated in the script, or if that was the influence of Tallulah Bankhead, right? There is the most famous anecdote about Lifeboat is that she wasn't wearing underwear, which would be, let's say, less noticeable if it was a simple soundstage, but they had to apparently climb the ladder to reach the boat, and everybody could see what she had beneath the skirt, and there were like different versions of these anecdotes. Even one of them states, I think McGilligan is mentioning that she apologized to one of the producers, and then she was standing on her head with her skirt once again. I mean, it's crazy. Like, but there was like this the main theme of these anecdotes is Tallulah Bankhead's
and her flashing her private parts quite consciously. I mean, she wasn't wearing underwear, and she was flashing her vagina
and ruining
her co-stars.
Yes, and ruining the shots, some of the shots.
Right.
So that's
which makes a nice rhyme with Basic Instinct. This whole Sharon Stone shot. Although there it wasn't her who wanted to do this, but
yes,
but Tallulah was apparently a little bit of an exhibitionist.
Yes, she was okay with that. She was of course a very colorful personality. I found this great quote that she said about cocaine. Cocaine isn't habit forming, and I know because I've been taking it for years. This is Tallulah Bankhead saying in, I don't know, maybe 1930s.
Yeah, this is something like Margot Channing could say it.
Exactly. And you mentioned Bette Davis, and of course, Tallulah Bankhead was famous on Broadway for starring in Dark Victory and The Little Foxes, the two roles that Bette Davis took to the screen. But what I'm suggesting is maybe, Hitchcock was apparently stimulated and excited by her presence on the set. She wasn't the easiest person to work with, and all of her collaborators confirmed that. But apparently, Hitchcock was he liked her as this, this colorful, over-the-top personality. And pretty and openly sexual, right? Of course, Hitchcock is famous for saying that he didn't enjoy women who had sex written on their faces, but apparently in the case of Tallulah Bankhead, who was 40 at the time, like this diva, like maybe not campy, but certainly pretty affectionate and stylized as a person. Maybe he was, I don't know, he was kind of encouraged to go deeper with these themes. But I think that it's also a pure example of, let's say, Zizek interprets the movie scene, the romance, the on-screen affair between Kovac and the Bankhead character, with this apparently upper middle class journalist, sucking this lively juices out of this working man, right? Who's almost like from a Tom of Finland, right? Commercial,
right? We
could say. So there is this tension. There is this. Also, you may go back to Lubitsch and Trouble in Paradise, right? How different classes are interested in each other, and how this libidinal energy travels between them.
And he even tells her very clearly, stop slumming, right? The word is there. Like slumming means, going downwards on the social ladder, to find sexual excitement in the lower classes. And he says to her, stop slumming. The moment when she pierces the newspaper, it's like really, I think it's obscene, because she's like literally like, like eating him up, like she's saying like, stop reading, like I'm here, and there's this finger. And also she's a castrating presence, because she is, and another very perverse scene when she is so insistent upon the amputation of the leg, right, of the William Bendix's character. She's like the German says, oh yes, we should amputate, and she's like, of course, we need to do this, and she then she coerces Gus Smith into the amputation, which is I think is a blatantly sexual thing, like that, especially since there's also this joke, and I think it's a very Hitchcockian, dirty joke, of course, given, the Hays Code and everything, that William Bendix speaks of his girlfriend, that they were great dancers in the Roseland, which was the famous dance hall. James Ivory made a film about it in the 70s. But, that they were dancing in Roseland, and he says, we danced for 80 consecutive hours. And Hume Cronin is like, for 80 hours, and it's of course it's clear that Hitchcock is referring to sex, that they have been having sex for 80 hours. By the way, we will see a variation on this in Rear Window with this young couple, to the left, who are having sex all the time, and they just have those little breaks in between. And here also, exactly the same things happen. William Bendix says that, no, we just had small breaks, like to freshen up, but basically we were dancing for 80 hours. So it's very, very clear that, here's William Bendix, he's also working class. He's, having great sex with his girlfriend all the time. And here's Tallulah Bankhead, who says, no, we have to cut off your leg. And again, because you won't be able to dance anymore, which is, I think, a sexual activity in the film. And then, she throws herself on John Hodiak. So basically, this is like I think it's Hitchcock at his most, I think, semi-consciously perverse, I would say. And it won't be until, well, his next film, Spellbound, will already be another one, of those Freudian, labyrinths. But here, Tallulah Bankhead is definitely a figure of this insatiable sexuality. And at the end of the film, she even becomes a lure for the fish when she decides, to put her bracelet in the water to lure the fish. So there's something of that too.
The shot, the underwater shot of the fish is my favorite in the movie. I think that the fish looks great. Yes, you're right. And of course, the very first shot is it's a phallic symbol, the chimney of a ship, right? And I found this 1990s article from the Hitchcock Annual, which is titled "The Misogynist at Rest: Women in Hitchcock's Lifeboat."
Oh wow!
So, of course, let's say the final point is that this movie is pretty empowering because we have this character of Tallulah Bankhead who is so openly sexual. So you can look at it from that perspective. But I think all these connections, the off-screen legend of Tallulah Bankhead and all these small details like the piercing the paper, it is obscene. And if you remember the feet, right, we have a similar, although tamed scene because between husband and wife in Mr. and Mrs. Smith when she's touching his ankles, right? His ankles with her feet. So it's definitely there.
Yes, I agree. I just wanted to say that there's also a question of virility as such, of manhood, because you have quite strong men in this film. You have this strong working class captain, William Bendix, and he's castrated, right, by Tallulah. You have John Hodiak, who I think his strength is sucked out of him by Tallulah in a way.
Exactly.
And you have the Nazi. You have the Nazi who is played by a real German actor, Walter Slezak. It's a very good performance. He's, I think, not accidentally overweight in the film. That was the time at which Hitchcock was losing weight, and he even makes a cameo in the Reducto newspaper ad for losing weight. So he's the fat Hitchcock and the thinner Hitchcock in the ad. And here, you have this quite chubby, I would say, chubby character of the German, who is incredibly strong. He keeps rowing this boat and rowing, and it seems like he's simply, he has the strength to do this. And let's not forget that Tallulah Bankhead is his enabler for a long while. Even when he proposes to amputate the leg, she's like, of course he should do it, and he should be our captain. He has all the expertise. But let's focus on the controversial element, because the film was, at first, it was well received. Then there were some pieces in the New York Times, not only in New York Times, saying that, the movie is actually very complimentary towards the Nazi character, because here, there's this, immature democracy of people who are acting in a completely irresponsible way, and there's this Nazi who actually has some sense of order, of power, and the thing is that they kill him at some point, right? That finally they assert themselves as a group by killing the character of Willie. And in the Truffaut conversation, Hitchcock says that they are like a pack of dogs who prey on their victim. And I want to focus exactly on this moment. Like, how did you read the scene of killing Willie? Because it's quite powerful. There's this moment when literally this group of people overwhelms Willie, and for a second he emerges like from a water. We see his face in this gruesome expression of pain, and then he again is swallowed up by this, Hitchcock's words, pack of dogs. And it's such a cruel scene. I think it's very graphic for that time. It also made me think a little bit of the torn curtain scene of killing a guy in the gas stove. We'll get to that. But how did you read this whole German, let's say, subtext? Because we know we talked in this podcast. Hitchcock worked in Germany. He worked at UFA. Slezak also worked at UFA, so he had many memories with Germany, and that they were good memories. And here that was this Nazi ideology. So how did you see this German element?
Probably Hitchcock's German connections are one of the reasons of this ambiguity, precise ambiguity, when it comes to the character of Walter Slezak. And I think what is striking in this scene is that their reaction is not it's not a crime of passion, we could say. They are not reacting to a direct threat. For example, they do not see Walter Slezak character trying to kill someone at that moment, right? They just discover he's lying, and that's enough for them to finish him, let's say. So I think this is striking, that it's not Hitchcock could have staged it in a less controversial manner by just showing them reacting to the direct threat, but he's not doing that. So I think, and also the way he stages that, putting camera at a distance, we are not close to the situation, we are looking at the whole tableau, let's say, at them struggling to put the Nazi outside the boat. I think it's pretty powerful, and that's maybe, I haven't thought about it before, but that's maybe one of these Brechtian moments, right? That we are not inside the story, we're not in the middle, let's say, of the story. And as a way of a footnote, I will just add that Steinbeck's initial idea was to tell the story for the first perspective. But that's not something Hitchcock did. So I think, but I think it's precisely the strength of this movie, and maybe the reason of the whole confusion. Because if it's obvious for us, as it was obvious for viewers at the time, that this is an allegory, right? Allegory should be more or less simple. You should be able to decipher it, to put it in the boxes. This is allegory of, like, I don't know, like Orwell's Animal Farm is the allegory. Who is, let's say, Stalin among these animals, and who is the proletariat, and so on. Now, here it's not like that, because even at the moment of crafting the script, there were some question marks from the Office of War Information, saying that on the paper it looks like almost like pro-Nazi propaganda. Of course, they were confusing the sympathetic depiction of a Nazi and depicting him as someone powerful. They were confusing that with pro-Nazism, right? I mean, but I think that's the subversive part of it, that he's not like some stock Nazi character that is, I don't know, crippled, very ugly and very sinister. No, he's a powerful man, and that's the problem. That's the question you asked at the beginning, quoting the movie. What do we do with people like him? He speaks languages, he's pretty strong, he's smart. That's the real problem, that he is so so similar to us that we could actually have dinner with him. We could sing songs with him, right? Because he's almost one of us. So I think that's the important and ambiguous part. I think I like this scene of killing the Nazi because it shows this, let's say, animal part of human nature that I think it's good that Hitchcock didn't want to show away for the sake of the argument. Let's say he didn't do that. But on the other hand, the depiction of this fractured democratic society, this is something I was thinking about watching this movie today, looking at the contemporary situation when different countries have different reactions. Of course, probably it cannot be any other way, but I think in Lifeboat you can sense this underlying discourse of democratic West as somehow weak. And this is, of course, a dangerous discourse, right? That the West is weak because it's deliberating, it's talking things over instead of acting. We hear that all the time, and this is, of course, something that Poles don't like in the reaction of the West, of the European West. That the West was very slow to recognize the threat of Putin and so on. So I think there is this element. I don't know how to read it coming from Hitchcock himself as an Englishman, but there is this maybe this will to power, like this will to have a stronger, more cohesive reaction when, of course, I think it's by definition it's impossible when you have so many different actors on a global scene. I don't know if what I say makes sense, but I think this is the link between the 40s and now. There's this feeling that the West is not strong enough, which in itself is kind of a right-wing argument, I would say.
Well, I think from a Polish perspective, the question is always a little bit different because there's and this is of course a huge discussion, but especially now when we look at Western reactions, our anger is that they simply don't recognize the savagery of war, and that treating Russia as just another state, just another democratic state is so blind, because in Polish experience, we have experienced the pure savagery of Russian war, culture. But here we have no Russians. That's in Lifeboat we have no Russians. I think at that time still, and especially what will happen in 1945 and 1946. It's a completely separate chapter, which, by the way, Hitchcock will a little bit tackle in Torn Curtain, let's say, but let's not even go there. Here, I think the question is that, and I for the first time I was watching the film, and for the first time I understood why it was controversial. Yes, because Walter Slezak's character is calm, he's composed, he's very cultured, he sings the Goethe song, he almost looks ironically at those bickering, dogs, as Hitchcock put it. When we add the sexual element, which we did today, we could compare them to rabbits also, right? Here's this boat, and suddenly they are jumping each other, almost like there's no restraint, there's no plan, and we need to tackle the ending, because for me, I deal a little bit with scripts. And if I had I gotten this ending in a script that was submitted to me, let's say, I would have rejected it outright, because I think the ending is completely, the bracelet, what happens with the bracelet, I think it's completely implausible. Exactly the moment when, after they killed Willie, suddenly Tallulah Bankhead says something like, "Oh, I have this bracelet here, we can use it to lure the fish and we will have something to eat." Like, what they have been talking about for the past 48 hours? Like, haven't they considered getting some fish from the sea? Is diamond ring such a great lure for the fish? Maybe, but that's not established in the film. So it's almost like they spent 48 hours in the boat bickering about everything, and suddenly Tallulah Bankhead is like, oh, there's a sea over there. Maybe let's get some fish. I think it's and in that and at that moment I thought, yes, that maybe, and I hate to say this, but maybe Bosley Crowther had a little bit of an argument in saying that these people are really stupid in the film. That they really didn't learn anything. They didn't have any ways of any means of survival. The German was the only one who knew what he was doing, and suddenly they have this idea with the bracelet, which really I think is implausible. So, and what I'm trying to say, probably one of my last thoughts about this film, is that I think that Hitchcock is looking at American democracy with British reserve, with British sense of irony. He also doesn't completely understand it. I think he is an outsider. He, for example, he's clueless when it comes to race relations. We have an African American character here played by Canada Lee. He's called George Joe Spencer, and you can sense that Hitchcock doesn't really know how to handle this character, although there are nice moments. For example, he's the only one who is not joining the pack of dogs when they are killing the Germans, so he's the only one who has the decency not to do it. But on the other hand, the race theme is not really addressed in the film, unless we count the moment when he's ironically asking, oh, should I vote too? Which I think is exactly Hitchcock's comment on American democracy, which prides itself on being completely inclusive, and yet there's a fellow citizen who ironically asks, oh, you want my vote too? Me being black. So just my last thought on this film is that for the moment, but probably will be slowly finishing, is that I think that Hitchcock is looking at those people, he's fascinated by them, but he also is very ironic in the approach to American democracy, which is a little bit strange in a wartime film. Maybe a wartime film is not exactly the moment to be so ironic as he isn't here. In this way, I almost preferred this fairy tale look at democracy that he had in Saboteur, when Barry Kane met the magical blind man, and then he met the group of freaks in the circus, and they represented the inclusive beauty of American democracy.
Let's vote.
Yes. Let's vote, exactly. So yeah, this is my thought for the moment, that here Hitchcock is making some sort of a comment saying, you are not as cohesive, you are not as inclusive, you are not as even intelligent as you claim to be, you American people. And I think some of the reviewers read the message and they responded to it.
Yes, I agree with you, although I'm not sure if it's fair to describe his attitude to race relations as you just did it. I think the single sentence, am I allowed to vote, is strong enough. And also I think we must remember the pressure of war propaganda, right? I mean, he couldn't craft his vision as he wanted, especially when it comes to this ideological pressures, to the representation of Americans, of survivors, civilians here. But of course, the documentaries like The Negro Soldier, this U.S. effort for the sake of World War II, to construct this coherent society in this numerous combat movies, right? That's another analogy we can pursue. Combat movies of the time that were showing us also the cross-section of US society with Italian Americans, Irish Americans, and blacks, working together to defeat fascism. I think that's an important point of reference, and probably I think I agree with you that probably he didn't want to go deeper, that he was a bit careless indeed. But I think he also couldn't really, let's say, address US racism on this boat, directly. That's something that comes after the war with huge changes in U.S. society after African Americans realized that in Europe they are treated as human beings, right? As full human beings, that they don't encounter so much racism in Paris, for example. So that's one thing. And my last note would be one of the first scenes. Of course, I like this shot with the New Yorker floating around, the cover of the New Yorker.
At the beginning.
Yeah.
But it's one of, did you notice what things are flowing in the water? It's only things that are pleasurable trifles or games. It's like cards, playing cards. It's a chessboard. It's a New Yorker. It's like, maybe he's saying, Americans are just spending time having good time.
Yeah, I think there is this realization that maybe for many Americans, the war is still something distant. Because when you think about it, this movie has this feel of a pre-World War II movie in the sense that the community must be convinced that Germans are a real threat. So I think we have a bit of this pre-World War II narrative, like this, that we must defeat these U.S. isolationist tendencies. I think there is this feeling in the movie, which is pretty strange because we are quite far in the war, right? U.S. public knows about the scale of the war in different arenas and so on. So I found this a bit strange that this in this sense it's kind of strange that they have to be convinced that maybe we should be cautious. But I wanted to refer to another moment, which I find maybe it's my way of overinterpreting this scene. But at the very beginning, the Tallulah Bankhead character, she says that she has these very precious images, the best images. That she ever managed to capture, and I think
she's a photographer.
Yes, she's a photojournalist. So I think it's very interesting when you try to approach it from the perspective of a director, of Hitchcock, and we know that he contributed to concentration camp documentaries. I think he edited the footage, or he shot part of it. No, I think he edited the concentration camp survey. So the question, the ethical question of the image. What can we show? How much spectacle can we make out of the war? So that's precisely because this movie starts in the moment when Foreign Correspondent ended, like with this lavish, beautifully shot plane crash scene, right? And here in this very first scene, this photojournalist, she says that she has these great images, and I think it was like this lingering question for Hitchcock, the director, and maybe many others. Can we go into Hollywood glamour during World War II, and to what extent, right? I think there is this feeling that maybe there is some ethical question connected with producing images.
Yes, absolutely. And just for the record, this won't be our last conversation about the wartime films of Hitchcock, because there will be a separate episode of Foreign Correspondents on two medium short films that he shot in England in 1944 in French, Bon Voyage and Aventure Malgache, and we will discuss it separately. I agree with you. I think, the moment when she loses her camera is interesting because also it links her to the character of James Stewart in Rear Window. But I just want to come back to two little points and make a third very little point, and then I will be finished. First point is, I think that Hitchcock remained skeptical towards American democracy and to Americans as such. I think there's a big amount of skepticism here for a wartime film. One has to only compare this to other, patriotic films at the time to see that, they weren't really this critical of American democracy. I think there is this point where he simply sees them as children in the woods, and Trouble with Harry will be also another example, of this sort of, beautiful setting, Vermont, American group suddenly finds a dead body, and what happens? Anyhow, we'll talk about it later. The second thing is interesting, Lifeboat as a meeting point of not only of those characters, but also of some crucial minds, American and British minds, that gave us some crucial wartime or immediately post-war narratives. There's Hitchcock, there's Steinbeck, there's McKinley Cantor, who was involved with this movie for a moment. He will later on write the book that will be the basis of The Best Years of Our Lives, the most important immediately post-war film, and Joe Swerling, who wrote the screenplay and who, of course, will write the screenplay for It's a Wonderful Life, another crucial post-war American film. So it's interesting that Joe Swerling, McKinley Cantor, John Steinbeck, Alfred Hitchcock all met on this lifeboat, let's say, and the movie has bits and pieces of their narratives. You can also see those other films, and you can see as the response to the war being formed. And the third point is that there is a Polish element to this film. In one moment, when William Bendix, so Gus Smith, mentions one of his favorite baseball players, and he mentions Stan Musiał, who was born in St. Louis as Stanisław Franciszek Musiał, and he was the descendant of Polish immigrants, so there is a mention of Polish character. And also one footnote to the foreign correspondent episode, which we forgot to mention. That film, Foreign Correspondent, was beautifully shot by Rudolf Maté, who was born in Kraków. I didn't know that. I learned it actually 2 days ago. So Rudolf Maté, who shot Passion of Joan d'Arc for Dreyer and shot Foreign Correspondent for Hitchcock, was born in Kraków, Poland. So we didn't know that at the time when we were doing the episode. So this is like a footnote, and this is
that's great. And I didn't catch that baseball player bit. So that's great.
Stan Musiał. So there's a little Polish element, but there will be a huge Polish element in Bon Voyage. We won't spoil it for you. Any final thoughts on Lifeboat?
No, my final thought is that it was really great to talk this movie over with you.
Same here.
Yes.
Same here.
So
it's the only 20th Century Fox film that he made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
there was an agreement for 2, but he only made this one.
And I think you can sense some discrepancy between Zanuck's sensibility and Hitchcock's sensibility, which of course could be productive, but I think it's good that it was only this one movie.
Well, just to I want to also say that it was wonderful to talk to you, and to our listeners, please share this podcast. It's really, really wonderful for us to know that there are listeners who find those discussions interesting, and the next time around we won't be moving to another feature. We will move on to those 2 shorts, Bon Voyage and Aventure Malgache, which are fascinating, and they are also, available. So please watch them before you listen to our next episode, and then we will move to Spellbound, which will be another interesting Freudian knot, this time very overtly so. And there will also be some Eastern European elements to it. The famous score written by Miklos Róża, born in Budapest, Hungary. But that will be in the future. Sebastian, thank you so much. I know that you have a couple of more weeks of your American stay. I know that you are researching some really fascinating things from film history. We won't be saying more at this point. So please, enjoy Philadelphia, and it was wonderful to talk to you. So this is it, I guess, in the 29th episode of Foreign Correspondents.
Deeper into Hitchcock.